Hi, this is Chris at Control Bionics. I just wanted to make a video real quick to show some of the general use of graphing and the NeuroNode controller with the NeuroNode, and just kind of go over some of the settings and such and how you would use those on a day-to-day basis. So what we've got here is I've got the NeuroNode hooked up to my arm, so it's currently set for my ring finger. As you can see, it's blinking green here on this light whenever I move that. And then the red blink, you'll see just kind of periodically come up, just showing that it's basically broadcasting the Bluetooth signal. So if it's doing that, that's fine. What I'm going to do here on the Trilogy is I'm going to open this Control Bionics icon here at the top. And then if we go into the NeuroNode button here, move this up, and I'm going to press Connect to NeuroNode. So here on the screen, just to kind of cover what we're seeing here, the blue line down at the bottom right now is the graph that covers my actual EMG signal. So if you see, if I move my ring finger, it's going to start tracking that change in that signal. The other two lines that you're going to see here are going to be the yellow line towards the middle of the screen and then the green line up at the top of the screen. So what those are is basically a rest point and an activate point. The yellow line being that rest point is going to be where you need to get your blue signal line underneath. And then that green activate line is going to be the one where your blue signal line needs to go above. So if I'm where I'm at right now, I'm below the yellow line, which is the first thing. So that's good. And then if I make a good switch with that ring finger, it's going to go above that green line. So that will actually count it as a switch and then send that switch out to the system. The green line, right now, we have it set so that whenever we make an actual switch on the system, it makes that audio signal. So if I make a few of these here, you can see that's just something we can set in the settings here so that it will kind of give us an audible noise so that we know for sure that it has made that signal. Again, whenever I do that, if you look at the LED light, that matches up here as well. So that green LED light's going to light up whenever we have gone below the yellow line and then above the green line. Now, if I open up the settings here in this middle button down at the bottom, you can see that we have an option at the top to change the view, basically, which is that y-axis maximum. Basically, that's just going to change how much of the screen is displaying here. So if we change this from 100, where it's at a default, change it to 80, press OK. You'll see on the numbers on the sides here that it's only showing up to 80 microvolts. So whenever I do the same switch, it's going to kind of go a little further off of the screen there. So that would be good for, say, if we wanted to take this down to, like 20. You'd see even small movements here are going to send it way higher because it's basically magnified in on that section of the screen. This would be good for anybody that has lower signal lines to work with and you're trying to get a very acute setting for that. This will help you kind of figure out where exactly that they are on the graph rather than trying to discern very, very small movement in the line. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back up to 100 here. The next thing we're going to look at is just below that is the audio signal I was talking about. Audio signal is just that beeping noise whenever you've made a switch. You can also turn on visual signal. This is going to basically flash the screen just to kind of give some sort of visual signal for somebody who can't do auditory and needs something visual other than the blue line with the yellow line and the green line and trying to figure that out. Basically just does that flash to show that it has made that switch. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the visual back off. Go down just a little bit further here. Now the two settings that we see here underneath of the NeuroNode EMG settings are ignore switch repeats and key press off delay. Now the key press off delay in most scenarios is something that we have set up so that the NeuroNode can be recognized by communication software. Without this, it is possible that it will switch too quickly and it won't see that switch. So typically we have this set to 0.1. Doesn't usually need to be changed past that. We do have some parameters below and above that to allow for customization if there does present a reason to change that to be any higher or lower. but by 0.1 should be good for it. Now, the important one for actual switching is going to be ignore switch repeats. And what this is basically acting like a roadblock or a stop after you've made a switch, so that whenever you made one switch, you can't make another until that time has passed. So if I set this to, I'm going to set this to a second just to kind of show here. So if I make one switch, another switch, it's going to do the beep because I am technically making a switch here. But if I go down into this bottom portion here in the search bar, I should be getting spacebar entry. Yeah, so space bars. But if you notice, it's only going to do it once every second. So even if I do it multiple times, it only gives me that one space. But if I wait a second in between each one, it's going to actually keep adding that space bar each time. So you're, again, just looking at that as being something. So if somebody has like a lot of tension or movement at that point, and whenever they go to switch, it's basically doing a line like this where it's consistently breaching that line and making new switches. You use that ignore switch repeats to make it so that whenever they do something like that, it's only doing that first switch, only that first intentional switch. And all that vesicular movement afterwards doesn't, interfere with that and cause them to select a bunch of things they didn't want to select. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and change that back to 0 for mine. And then just below there, you're going to be looking at 3 more things here. So long press is something that we have set up for the Apple system on iOS. The Apple uses a built-in system with their actual switch control for a long press that allows you to hold down the switch for a period of time, and then that acts as a new function. There are some functions inside of Windows communication software that will allow that, but there aren't too many that will read that as a separate option. If you do run into that, you can turn on this long press. Everything is going to look the same, but what it's doing is whenever you take this blue line up and above the green line, you're wanting to hold it above that green line for a period of time. So if you see, if I hold that for half a second, you can set that inside of the communication software, other software that you have, and then the long press will allow that to work. Now, before I go into dynamic scaling or auto baseline, we'll do some of these static scaling settings here first. And we'll go over these 5 buttons that you see here. These 5 buttons, the space, enter, 1, 2, and F12. Those are basically just the keyboard key that your NeuroNode will be sending to the system as the switch. So right now it is on space. And as we were showing earlier, I was getting that space bar whenever I went to the search down at the very bottom here. But we typically just keep that on space. There are some scenarios where other programs or communication software work better with a 1 key, a 2 key, or the F12 key. So we do have those options available right now so that that can be used. But we're going to leave that on space for our default for now. Now, the next thing I'm going to go over here is the static scaling, the signal on amplitude, which is green to match that green line at the top, and signal off amplitude, which is to match that yellow line that was towards the middle of the screen there. So again, this is the green for activation and the yellow for rest. So you always need to be able to get that blue line below yellow and then above green. So let's go back to the graph here. Let's say that this 80 and 40 is just, it's way too high. Like I can only get to about, let's say, reliably about 30 or 40 with a small motion. Even then, probably about 20 is a little more reliable. And then my resting, whenever I'm sitting still here, is probably right around a 5, I would say. So let's go ahead and I'm going to change these settings. I'm going to drag this down to, we'll go ahead and make this 30. And then we're going to make our signal off, that resting point. Let's make that, we could turn that down to probably 15. Okay, and you'll see there that this is one of those scenarios that if you've got a lot of extra space up at the top and you don't really need all of that, I could 100% go to the top here, go to that y-axis, and we'll just turn it down to like 15. That way we kind of get a better display of where we're at with this new setup here. So I'm going to make a little bit less movement here. You'll see that's a lot less movement, but I'm still getting that reliably. And I'll say it's something to where it's not quite where it needs to be at. I can always just change that just a little bit. Say I'm not resting below that 15, or I'm not getting above that 30. I basically just want to keep an eye on where this blue line settles at whenever I am resting, and then base the yellow line off of that. So I always want the yellow line to be above where my resting point is here. So just as long as it's above this like 5 to 10 range where it seems to be fluctuating between, that yellow line is going to be good. The green line is just where my peaks are going at whenever I actually want to make a switch here. So whenever I'm doing that, I am getting above that 30. Looks like one missed at about 20, one at about 25. So any points like that, as much as I am getting above the 30, if I'm making these movements and it's not quite making it there, and I'm only getting about like a 25, we can totally turn that green line down to 25. And then just going to relax below the yellow line here. And then, yeah, so that 25 is a little bit easier to hit there. Okay, so with this in mind, there are some scenarios where a static line doesn't work for somebody, because it may be that they have a resting level that is just very sporadic like this. Let's say like it's very just, it's all over the place at times, and they have a hard time keeping it below that point. Or whenever they get fatigued, you know, they get down real low and they can make a little bit of movement, but they can't quite make that 25. They're only getting to about 15. What we're going to do here, for somebody that needs this consistent change and updating, we're going to turn on dynamic scaling. And you'll see that it turns off the static scaling section and opens up this dynamic scaling area down at the bottom here. So the three options that you have here, you'll see that there's still the green line and this yellow line. So you're looking at doing the same thing here, but instead of having a static number for both of them, so like a solid number, you're looking at a solid number for your green activation line, and then a percentile for the yellow line, which I'll explain here in just a second. This last option here for the window timing, it's set at 20 seconds. And what that's basically meaning is that every 20 seconds, it's going to be averaging the blue line that you have. So say if the blue line is traveling along and it's, we'll say that our blue line is sitting at about, looks like 5. You'll see that these lines are trying to basically accommodate every like 20 seconds or so. It's slowly accommodating that change here. So if I was to start making a little more motion, it's kind of averaging out that new motion to find me a new placement for these yellow and green lines, even though I'm not changing them within settings. So with that said, if I come back here, that average that's doing here with the window timing, if I look at the signal off amplitude, it's at 100%. And what that means is that the average that we're getting from the window timing, so every 20 seconds, whenever it's getting that calculation, basically, it's going to make that yellow line sit at about 100% or right even with where that average would be. So if I turn that up to 110%, say that over the next 20 seconds, I averaged around 15, it's going to make that 110% of that 15. So you'd be looking at around like 16, 17 of where it's sitting at. Now this green one is going to be based off of your yellow line. So basically you're looking at this being 5 microvolts. So that scale that we have on the side, it's going to be 5 above where this yellow line is. At all times, it's always going to be 5 above that. So if I turn this up to 10 just to show, you'll see where this yellow line is. If I look up, the green line is always going to be 10 higher on that scale. So this is going to be something that you'll keep in mind, that if you've got somebody who has a very sporadic movement down here at this resting line, and you don't want them to hit it very easily, as you can see here, that 10 is going to kind of give them a gap so that they aren't always hitting that, but whenever they're ready, they can make that switch and still hit that, and it'll stay at that level. Now, if I keep relaxing and say this is a fatiguing point, you'll see that that keeps coming down and down to try and meet where I'm at on the scale here. So say my movements have really gone down, and that's just not enough for that there. Somebody that is at this point could very easily have this dynamic scaling. And then we'll go to settings. We're going to turn this green one back down to 5. So that's only 5 above. So now it's going to be really easy for me to make these movements and make a switch. I'll go back into settings here. The last thing to go over here is going to be auto baseline. Auto baseline is going to be very important for somebody that is having a hard time getting their signal down. So say I've just got this high motion and I can't get it to come down. It's just not wanting it to like really communicate with that. I'm going to go ahead and press auto baseline for this. And you'll notice that it just suddenly dropped that signal down. What that's doing is it's coming to the signal and bringing the signal down to a level where it needs to be right here at the base. So instead of me trying to continuously find out where my relaxing point is and I can't get there, I can use auto baseline to basically force that signal line down to a more manageable place so that I can get it to this point. And that's for, as you can see, I can still bring it back up to that point if I actually relax and it comes back up to this, but it's always available to do auto baseline to just kind of force it down so we can kind of see where we're at, bring it down to a level that's manageable, and then get it back within those parameters that we're looking at here. So just to recover what we went over real fast, the blue line is just that EMG signal that is on the NeuroNode. The light here on the NeuroNode itself will blink red, just showing that it is sending out that Bluetooth signal. And if I make a switch, it's going to light up green, showing that we did have a successful signal. A successful signal is done whenever the blue signal line is below the yellow line and then goes above the green line whenever a switch is made. These parameter lines that are here for the yellow and green are color-coded within the system here whenever you go into settings in that middle button. And under static scaling, you have a set number for both of these. So you can set them higher or lower based on where that blue line is at. And I can also go into dynamic scaling and change those settings so that it averages over a set period of time. And then that average will be set into a percentile for our resting yellow line. And then the green line for activation will always be a set number above our yellow line. Change this back off of dynamic. The long press function is on here is something that is for a program or system like switch control on the iPad that allows you to hold that blue line above the green line for a set period of time to give you a new function. Otherwise, this can be left off. The auto baseline is an option that allows for somebody who has a lot of sporadic movement to be able to bring that line down forcibly to get it into a manageable position for them. The 5 buttons that you have here are just the keyboard keys that the system is sending out whenever you make a successful switch. Space is our default. Other systems do work better with Enter 1, 2, or F12 key, depending on the system that you're using. The options that you have here for ignore switch repeats and key press off delay. Ignore switch repeats is just that block that keeps you from making more than one switch over a period of time. So you make that first switch, it's going to basically give you a timer. After that timer, you'll be able to make another switch to the system again. Key press off delay, something that we have set at 0.1 by default. It is just there to allow the system to be able to recognize the switch being made on the system. There may be some other uses for it, so it is available to bring that up or take that down. Otherwise, leaving that as 0.1 is where it is desired. Your options up here at the top for display settings, the Y-axis maximum is just the window display and how many microvolts on that scale it's actually going to show. So basically, the lower you go, the more zoomed in it's going to be. The higher you go, the more zoomed out it is going to be. The 2 options down here for audio signal and visual signal are just going to give you a sound or a flash on that application that shows that you have made a successful signal. So either the beeping noise for a successful signal of being below the yellow line and then above the green, or a flashing black screen, whenever you go below the yellow line and then above the green. But that should cover basic use of this. If there are any questions, feel free to, always contact out to us and give us whatever information you have there so we can help you out with that. So if there's a very specific case, we can assist with that. Otherwise, we'll be looking at more videos at covering things like spatial, and that's in another video. But this should be for the general use of the NeuroNode on a day-to-day basis.